noise on the show. We agree to disagree, and for a good cause. Yeah, and we always try. No.
This is an EA production.
So we have to switch them off. Yeah, I've seen those instances and like, hello, I see you on TV. You're like, okay. Yeah, so yours is off, huh? Okay. So, okay. Actually, 1 minute to go. Yes. They'll send tweets, comments, Facebook. We'll read some of them. Yes, hello? This is my principal camera? This one? This one, good. Okay. Actually, you don't look at any camera. We talk to each other. And welcome to Debate 411. Thank you so very much for joining us on this edition of the program. It is raining out there. I can see and I can also feel it. But if it is, crank the volume up. If you cannot be able to hear us properly, you could as well use your earphones and listen to us loud and clear. This is Debate 411. We get to meet right here on the program every Monday and Wednesday to discuss and debate about issues of concern to you, and of course get some solutions to them. Today on the program, we're still talking about issues of accessing finance because it's still an issue out there, is it? We'll be able to also find out right here on the program. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. My panelists on the program, Dr. Monique Sanzabaganwa, Deputy Governor, Central Bank of Rwanda. Thank you so much for joining us on Debate 411.
Thank you.
And of course, also with her right there is none other than Mr. Bosco, who's with Access to Finance. Welcome to Debate 411.
Thank you, Eugene.
And also from the financing institutions, we have Mr. George Odhiambo right here from KCB. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anango.
On the other hand, the people who work with the SMEs, the people who work with the entrepreneurs, Rebson Zala, once again on Debate 411, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Grace Mugabekazi, thank you for joining us on the program.
A pleasure.
Now, before we get deeper into the program, it's important for us to understand whether this issue that people keep saying, that if an entrepreneur is asked for a list of problems that they face, access to finance is usually at the top of the list. And we need to understand if this indeed is a concern. Is it really true that this is a problem? Dr. Monique, do you feel that this is really a problem or it is not a problem as we are putting it out there?
Yeah, I think it's a problem. The recent competitiveness report has mentioned this as one of the problems, but it's a problem that is growing smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a problem that is growing smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
Before I bring in the people who are dealing with the entrepreneurs in terms of giving them the money or not, Rebson, do you feel that this is a problem that is growing smaller and smaller, or it's getting worse by the day?
According to me, I think it's it's getting worse by the day. But if she says it's growing smaller and smaller, we would really want to hear more on the smaller and smaller.
And what smaller means.
Yes.
Chris, what is your take on that? It's growing smaller. It's becoming less of a big concern. Do you agree with that?
Access to finance for entrepreneurs is still a concern. It's a concern that's being addressed every day. But then again, we are very fortunate that more and more people are interested in getting into entrepreneurship. So even as it's being addressed, the demand is growing. Yeah.
The demand is growing. But do you agree that is a problem that is being fixed and is becoming minute by the day?
I see more and more people being taking investment into financing of SMEs. So that's a very good sign. Yeah.
So it's a good sign. Let's speak to Mr. Yachu, who works with the Access to Finance. The name of your institution itself, Access to Finance. And this is the issue we're talking about right here.
Yes.
Let's look at where your institution is placed in sorting out this mess, this issue, this concern by entrepreneurs out there.
Well, probably I need to clarify something that, well, the name Access to Finance is, actually we are not a financial institution that is actually financing SMEs, but we are working with financial services providers to actually to remove the constraints that are there in the market and to make sure that, I mean, not only SMEs, but also those people in the rural areas may access actually financial services. So SMEs here, I mean, and I understand that it's core as well. And so we are working with them, and throughout this show I'll be able to share and probably say what we are doing. I would concur with what Dr. Monique said. We can see that in the market there is something happening, especially financial institutions are really designing new products, are devising some ways, new ways to reach the customers, especially into SME. And we are seeing different initiatives from the government as well. So something is happening.
Is it the same mindset that you're sharing with them?
More or less the same. When we talk about the problem to entrepreneurs about access to finance, whereas it is a sub-problem, the real problem is access to information. So if you can address access to information, then access to finance will become a little more lighter.
So it becomes a lighter issue. One will deal with the issue of accessing to information. Now, to the motion of the day-to-day, we are saying that the motion is saying that entrepreneurs who fail to get successful in asking for a loan or a financial facility are actually the ones to blame when they fail to do this, and not the financial institution, because it is you who has failed to meet certain deadlines or certain guidelines. That is why you failed to get that particular money. So, Madame Monique, do you agree with that motion? Do you support it? Do you feel that no?
I think yes and no, because we have some instances where there is an issue of bankable projects, but on the other hand, I believe also that banks are made to create projects and hold hands of their clients to really come to a point where they can be able to have a bankable project. So it's yes and no, really.
It's yes and no. Banks are supposed to get to a point where they hold the hands of the SMEs to the point where they're able to create bankable projects. Is this what is happening on the ground?
Actually, when we look at the issues aligned to SMEs and the challenges that they are actually facing as regarding, this issue of access to finance as well as access to information. I don't know whether the banks or the financial institutions have really taken time to really analyze the plights that are actually with the SMEs. Because here we are looking at, different categories of the SMEs, especially, the young people that have actually left university and they want to pursue entrepreneurship. They want to become businessmen in the future. You don't expect that, they have all what it takes. So when we are talking about holding hands here, I would really want to see these banks being involved from, the beginning to the end. But what happens when you go and you are just a youth from, a university? They will not recognize even your idea, that this is an idea, we can actually pick up and continue. What they are looking for is something, security, that they can actually, say, in case this happens, I will hold on it to this. So they are not actually ready to, to take you and nurture you to become, rather than they actually, make you fail or make you feel like, this is not the time for me to be in the business. Whereas maybe this is really your dream, and this is where you want to go. And I'm seeing something here not matching very well between what they say and actually what they do. Yes.
Grace, without beating about the bush and being diplomatic, I want us to be able to hear from you. Why do you think that the entrepreneurs are actually not to blame in most instances when they lack or fail to get this finance when they apply for these loans? What are those issues that you feel this particular scenario, it was not the fault of this SME? The banking or the financial institution just failed to give them this funds. What are those areas?
Primarily, the way accessing financing from banking institutions is set up requires a lengthy procedures. They require that people have collateral, which in most cases that some of the businesses that we are working with do not have. They require that these businesses be in the traditional type of business. So maybe something that has to do with processing is more attractive to banks than a business that's in the creative industry or service industry. So the banking institutions are making it difficult for young entrepreneurs, for SMEs to achieve getting financing because of the setup of the frameworks behind loans.
So it becomes a cumbersome process. George, yes.
Yeah, I think when we speak of SMEs, we have to distinguish. There are startups which have specific problems, including, for instance, collateral and other things. And most of the time, the promoters don't have that credit history. Those are really challenges. And there's a market failure there. And that's why government, for instance, has established BDF to really try and bridge that gap. Like they can now offer this quasi-equity kind of grants to the startups and other solutions. But I think there is an issue of also established SMEs. As we define an SME, it's not just a startup, but it's anything that is employing either less than 100 employees, can turn over less than 50 million Rwandan francs a year, or can have invested a capital of less than 75 million. So we have so many established businesses which are not startups anymore. But there's another issue of corporate governance. I think it's another issue we need really to look into. And there I mentioned the issues of who owns this, how is this governed? Is it a family business, or do you have books of accounts and all of those things? I think that's also an issue for the banking institutions that they face with regards to established SMEs.
But then you mentioned, before you come in, you mentioned that there is a failure here in terms of where startups are asked for collateral and all that. As the overseer, as the prefect in all this, as the regulator, what then are you doing to ensure that these bottlenecks or these requirements are made easier for these startups to be able to access finance? Okay,
so many things. One is, I mentioned what the effort that government has put in place, the BDF, but as a regulator, for instance, we've promoted this credit reference system so that your credit history can be tracked on how you use your phone, on how you pay your electricity, on how you have paid your school, how do you call it, the sponsorship, the books. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can build your track record in really being credit worthy by not necessarily having run a project, but your behavior in the market in generally. That's one. Second, there is with regard to the issue of collaterals, the regulation can allow issues like movables, for instance, now to be like allowable for as collateral. So there are
movables like which ones? Like what?
Movables like your TV set, movables like your car, something like that. You don't have to have a mortgage or something, a house or another property. Yes. You can use your kettle. You can use your crops, the warehouse system, the warehouse receipt system. So the legal framework is opening more and more new collaterals to alleviate
to be able to
problem.
Open the doors for these ones to come in.
But also there is also this the extension of financial institutions, not just commercial banks, but also we are talking of the circles. The circles are really helping the small SMEs, especially in rural areas, in agriculture, and so on and so forth. And those really work on the principles of cooperatives, and it's easier for them to have access to smaller loans. But as they grow up, then they start maybe facing bigger issues with the commercial banks. But those are the few steps that are being put in place.
Before you come in, Yachi, let me first of all bring in Georgia, because the good doctor here says that, you know, we have created a platform or an avenue where you can use your movables, giving examples like your TV, your car. But still, the reality is that even if you're to present such kind of stuff as collateral, there will still be other stumbling blocks. Like you'll be asked, which year is this car? And so if it is this particular year, we cannot be able to take it as collateral. This one, wapi, is, you know. So we still, you know, create a way, but we still also put some stumbling blocks on the table.
Thank you. Allow me to broaden the discussion.
Yes.
We cannot discuss SME access to finance without talking about banking. Mm-hmm. Banking is a business, and is a business with investors. First of all, banks have a responsibility to safeguard the investment and also the deposits of customers. Literally, the bank does not have a stock of funds somewhere to let out. It's your money that you're not using today that I'll give to Repson. And I promised you, when you come back for it, you find it. However, back to the discussion, the real issue is coming out is information. It's not entirely impossible to get access to finance because you don't have a collateral. There's information, especially like BDF in the local environment, access to finance Rwanda. We have insurance companies playing part in bridging the gap of lack of collateral where it is needed. And basically the governance issues in SME structure is a big hindrance even before you come to us for financing. Because we're looking for supporting businesses, not only with money, but also advisory services, which we give to so many SMEs. A number of people walk in the bank just to ask questions, which Repson will charge them for answering, but we'll do it for free, because it's our responsibility to support them with information.
But even with that, it seems like you're also shooting yourself on the foot, because who should be giving this information that you're saying is not out there? Who should give out this information? Who's failing to give it?
It's a collective responsibility of government agencies who are doing it, of the banks, financial institutions, and consultants like Repson. For example, young people out of college have very good ideas. To them, there's no limitation of possibilities they can do. And when they want to have these ideas into practical sense, one of the most important things they require is not necessarily financing. Some of them start from family backyard. Some of them start from family premises. Identifying the market. They would have skills to produce what they want to produce. The bank would be interested in knowing where do you sell your services or goods once you produce them. So we work with them, especially in agriculture, in general trade, in corn farming.
So what he's saying is banks have done their part. We are doing, even government institutions, we've done our part, including creating BDF. So SMEs and entrepreneurs, it's now up to you. The ball is in your court. This is probably the statement that is coming up.
I want to agree to some extent with what he said about the fact that SMEs hold some responsibility. When asking for finance, entrepreneurs should be able to prove that their ideas or their concepts are worth investing into, that they have a market for what they want to invest into. But back to the traditional financial institutions, the banks here, we also face a huge issue with the terms of financing. The fact that banking institutions are very rigid when they're dealing with businesses. You do not offer patient capital, because when someone is in business, they don't necessarily have good months throughout the year. The time a person makes an investment in the business is not the time when the business picks up. So having certain, space for businesses to allow them to grow, taking the risk alongside them before you attack them and say you have failed, we are coming back for everything that we put into you. That would be a big move, and that would allow for more businesses to be able to come to banks. Right now, in the space that I work in, most of the entrepreneurs that we work with are like shying away from banks totally because of the interest rates and also because of the risk that they get into when they partner with banks.
And because also of what George says, this is not our money. It's not just here waiting for you to come and take it. Could you also respond in that particular way based on what she's
Absolutely. She's raised the issue of patient capital. Mm-hmm. There's room for patient capital in banking. Unfortunately, it's not very common. Mm-hmm. It's available for investors who are high end of SME and some corporate who are doing investments in terms of construction. We don't ask them to service the principal until they complete the investment of the development they're doing. They service interest through other resources they have. On the issue of rigidity that you've mentioned dealing with young businesses, we advise businesses to prioritize. Sometimes businesses invest the financing in what looks good and is not necessarily what the business requires. If you're producing some products through agricultural produce, for example, and you spend a big chunk of that money in financing the front office furniture and computers, so you are eating into your core business investment. So at some point you run in problems. So it's prioritization that we encourage. We are not the experts in the business entrepreneurs run, but we really would wish that a big percentage of the financing they seek addresses their core needs of developing and growing their business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, has been silent.
Yep.
Before Dr. comes in, he's been so silent for quite some time. Let's hear from him just on that particular line of thought, yes. that banks are becoming too rigid. We just want the money back. We want to, safeguard the risks and all that kind of a thing.
Well, I really understand. I mean, the business of banking is financial intermediation, where you have the savers and you have the borrowers. So, and you need to understand that business properly so that actually you protect the interest of either party. Now, the issue, there is a fundamental issue here. I used to be on that side, and I met different entrepreneurs.
Until you turned
yes.
to say, I can't manage this one.
Well, now the issue is, why do you want the bank to take a risk that you don't want to take? And you find different, or I would say some entrepreneurs, wanting to start big. And actually, George alluded to it. Why don't you start small and grow big? That's the principle.
But an entrepreneur is supposed to think big.
No, think big, but start small. Then you grow big. That's very important. That's a key principle. That means you actually start with your own savings, or you may get some funds from the family. That's possible. You start small. You do a proof of concept. You understand the business. You create some, show to me that you've been trying to to nurture your business, you've understood the concept, you've seen the constraint, the challenges, and then from there, any bank will be running to you because they can see you understand what you are doing. That's very important.
You know,
But number two,
they're getting on fire.
number two,
you know what?
Let it just come in
Let me say
immediately.
this.
Yes.
My friend here, when we were all on the same side,
Yes.
we were talking the same language. You can see now he has crossed to the other side. The language is talking. You know, this is the reality. You expect that, look at the nature of our families. When you're talking of borrowing money from the families, what are you talking about? Do we have what it takes? Do we have the money? This is now a young man that has, he thanks God that he has gone to the university. He's coming out, he wants to become an entrepreneur. And you are telling me now, I go borrow back
From your brothers
from
and
my
sisters.
brothers and sisters,
Who
that they are
also-
also looking at me,
Yes.
who has just come out of the university to come and actually
So
help
this is a
them.
pipe dream. This is just
This is-
theory.
Yeah. So,
Allow me to
Yes.
interject a
Yes,
little.
yes.
That brings us to the issue of equity. When you have a good idea, there's someone with money without that idea. If you can come
you know what, George? When you are talking about an entrepreneur, I have been in that, game for a long time now. And I have actually, trained these people of all these issues. Start small and blah, blah, blah. And I've actually been calling banks to come and advise when I'm actually training. But the people that come to tell us the stories of the bank, and you go to the bank, they are not the people that you'll meet there. You'll actually meet a different kind of people
Who's thinking differently.
completely. And you are just left there amazed, but I was told this. And they're saying, whoever told you that one, we don't know about that.
Can we take a break and think about that, and then we come back and move the
I think-
conversation forward? We'll take a very short break.
Yes.
Just stay on that and then keep that particular thing that is in your mind that you want to talk about when we return. Thank you so much for being with us. This is Debate 411. We're talking about the issue of access to finance. And of course, we're asking ourselves, those entrepreneurs who file for loans and, getting some financial support and then fail to get them, are they the ones to blame for that particular failure? Or is it the financial institutions that are to blame? Talk to us. Tell us the list of things that you feel that banks should do to make it easier for SMEs to access finance, and also the list of things that SMEs should do for them to easily get this money. Talk to us via @debate411, that is on Twitter, and you can also talk to me at Eugene Anangwe. We'll see you shortly after the break.
Shop at Nakumatt TTC and Nakumatt Kigali City Tower and enjoy 50% discounts on home living face towels, bath towels, and hand towels. Grab this great opportunity and get yourself selected carpets at a half price. Hurry, hurry, hurry while stocks last.
Terms and conditions apply. Nakumatt, you need it. We've got it.
So Natasha, are we cornering our teachers? Are we being unfair to them?
At the end of the day, Fiona also mentions that the more you show them this condom, the more you're opening up their minds to having sex. But do you feel well represented? Do you think the media issues are well taken to the table when it comes to advocacy? How do we convince them and say that we shut it down because you exceeded the limits? The word conservation looks just complicated, but how do we simplify this?
What role do our schools play then? And the people around our children, what role can they play in order to avoid these children becoming a menace in the society?
Caroline, you just want to sound moral, but you're just not accepting the reality on the ground.
Well, I want to sound moral and encourage it and practice it.
This is an EA production.
hahira muri Nakumatt KCT na Nakumatt Kigali City Tower maze uryoherwe n'igabanuka ry'ibiciro ringana na 50% ku mayisume y'ubwoko butandukanye. Koresha aya mahirwe uhabwe itapi wihitiyemo kuri 1/2 cyayo wari bwishyure. Ihute ntutangwe. Amategeko n'amabwiriza birakurikizwa.
Nakumatt, you need it. We've got it. And welcome back. Thank you so very much for still staying with us. This is Debate 411. You can participate actually because we are live and we'll be able to read some of your comments right here on the program. All you need to do, if you're on Twitter, tweet me at Eugene Anangwe, or you can tweet at Debate 411 or use that hashtag Debate 411. We'll be able to sample some of your questions right there. We're talking about the issues of access to finance. We have the good Deputy Governor of the Central Bank right here with us, Dr. Monique Sanzabagano. We have Yachu, who's from Access to Finance, George from KCB, Rebson Zala, and of course Grace Mugabe-Kazi. Thank you so much for being with us and also accepting to be on the program. Now, before we went for the break, you were complaining of how when he crossed over to the other side, he changed tune.
Completely.
And it's important for me to, of course, also be very fair to him so that we're able to get a response from him and get to understand, is that do things change? When you cross over to the other side, you're now speaking the language of the financial institutions. And as you answer that, could you also tell us what are the list of things that you feel SMEs or those who come to borrow from financial institutions, the mistakes, the common mistakes that they make that may push the blame back to them when they miss to get this money?
Well, I think, just to come back to that crossing, it's when you cross, then you have a balanced judgment, and which is very important in life, I mean, especially when we are supporting SMEs. So what I was saying is, well, there are different financing, there are alternative solutions to finance SMEs. It's not just that classical way of banking. You may get even actually funders, equity funders, they're there. I mean, you may find venture capitalists, you may find, I mean, those people who may actually have a buy-in in your project and come and join you, share the risk as well. But the bank is giving you a loan, you don't share the risk. At some point you share the risk, but when, I mean, you failed, they will say, well, you pay back. But when you get a partner, then you know that you are sharing also. You are sharing the benefit, but also the loss at some point. So now, there are some common mistakes that entrepreneurs make. I wouldn't say that, financial institutions don't have something to do now. Well, they should actually continue to learn about different segments within the SME sector, because the way you deal with a small SME, a small enterprise, it's not the same way you deal with a medium or a big one.
So is this what is happening? Are they dealing with them in the same way, we're using the same yardstick? Is this what you're reporting here?
That some haven't actually cracked that down and understood, especially the small segment where the majority is. So they don't have books of accounts, you can't find them, I mean, with proper recording, you can't find them with the right collaterals. So those ones, they require a special skill and understanding where you go to the field, visit the client and collect the right data and lend on the basis of that. So you shouldn't go and say, well, bring me a balance sheet or a P&L. It's impossible for that small. But
before you go further,
yes.
Dr. Monique is listening to this, and as from the central bank and of course being the regulator, why is this happening? Because I'm sure it is happening out there. Because if he mentions it, it's a case in point that probably is going on with some financing institutions doing that, using the same yardstick. So how can the central bank, and why is the central bank not probably, cracking the whip on this one in terms of helping SMEs who don't have these qualifications to get money?
Yeah, actually, I'll come back to that point of the deepness and diversification of services and products in the market. Every bank has its own business model. Some are just for corporate banking, or they do retail, but really not, I mean, there is, I would say, a strategy and a business model for every institution. And some will really focus square on SMEs and specialize in financing SMEs. So it will depend. We don't here generalize the issue that all the banks are the same. No, they are not, because their business models are different. Their target market is different.
So they can do whatever they want and handle
no, it's not like
SMEs the way they want.
No, it's not like they can do everything they want. Yes. But because the point George made, that a bank is an investment. So it depends on on the business model and the shareholders what they want and so on and so forth. But for the regulator side, what we do is to encourage that there is diversity in the market, that we encourage financial institutions really coming to add value to serve the underserved segments of the market. All of them, almost all of them, will have like a line to serve SMEs. But here we should also bring in the concept of we are coming from far and we still have a long way to go as an economy in terms of skills building, in terms of that sophistication in doing business. We are talking really of a situation where everyone is learning. And the question I wanted to ask to George at some point earlier on was, I feel that there is a problem maybe at the entry, but also there is a problem during. Like when you have even given a loan to an SME, how much of monitoring do you do? How much of advising in the process before the project runs bad? Because most of the time, not most of the time, but sometimes you can find really that there is like a silence in between, and even that SME that managed to break through then cannot
collapses
make it up to the end.
along the way.
So I just wanted to feel whether the banks are really doing the right thing, or if they are learning in terms of how the staff are trained to really handhold the clients, how much visits are done, not just really looking at paper, but really engaging. I feel
to
that
also strengthen their capacity.
I feel that we still lack that capacity within the banking institutions. But
George will not. He will not run away from that question.
feeling.
He's right here. He'll be able to answer that particular one. But before he answers that, Dr. Monique, coming from you as from the central bank, what are you also doing to follow them up and ensure that they are also committing to what they committed to do? Part of that being ensuring that they follow them up.
Yeah, I think that they are doing, maybe they're not perfect, but what we see is that their lending to SMEs is increasing. We are seeing that they're being more cautious about the non-performing loans. That's why you're seeing the ratios are declining. That far we can go. We are not going to go there and do the business for them, but we are not either going to enforce something that is not prudential. So what we want is for them to lend prudently, is to encourage them to really lend responsibly. It's encourage them to really have these discussions at the board level and see, like, I always say that a bank is a citizen and has responsibility like any other citizen of the land. And in terms of lending, there are issues to promote, like lending to SMEs, like promoting women, like promoting the youth, and so on and so forth. While you making money, you also doing something, you promoting the productive side of the economy. That's what he mentioned, that they are responsible investors. But that's in principle.
You should not stop at that.
Yeah.
Okay. George,
Okay.
Does that answer for you? Did she answer for you your question?
I couldn't have put it any better, but allow me to once again broaden the discussion. When we're talking about SMEs access to finance, I would rather be discussing SMEs access to financial services. Because in the business of SME that I serve, not more than 20% of them ask me for finance. The other 80% or more just want payments to happen in time, clearances to happen, transfers and SWIFT to happen. So when we limit this discussion to access to finance, we forget about financial services that most of them actually require. On the point of monitoring there is a disconnect. And that disconnect is coming narrow and narrow. When SMEs who need financing for investment or working capital get finances from the bank, there's a need for us and the responsibility we own to monitor that they do what they said they will be doing with the money and follow a timetable of what they will be doing. One thing you cannot ignore that SME players are very creative and risk takers. So you might say, I want to do A, then month 2 a new idea comes because you attended a class that Repson was teaching. Then you think that you can put your money elsewhere. Then you start scattering yourself in terms of your strategy. If we don't have that close monitoring with you and listen to where you're coming from and also advice, we lose some on the way, unfortunately, a few. And because of that kind of risk-taking nature of SMEs, they need to work closely with the banks, and the banks need to work closely with them. So let's be talking about financial services for SMEs.
On top of the financing them. Rebson and Grace, what are the key things that you want to tell them today? As far as being ambassadors of those who are out there seeking this financing as entrepreneurs, what would you tell them? What are the key things that you'd say, financial institutions, these are the key things that you need to look into deeply? And to the regulator as well.
Yes, and I really want to say this. I just want to bring a kind of a scenario here of an SME is like a baby that has been born, and you need to nurture that baby from the time it's born to the time that it will be able to walk and run. And sometimes the financial institutions, they want the baby to run before he is actually matured to run. And that disconnect that actually George was talking about, it's not just some, most of them, because what happens is you are left on your own. Nobody comes to advise you, and you use that money. The only thing that you'll see a lawyer knocking at your door because you have not maybe serviced your loan. If there is that relationship that we are supposed to create, because you never know that this business that you're looking at like a nothing today might be something tomorrow, and we actually need the processes to be followed to make sure that whatever this person is actually if there is a will and there is the way and is able to appreciate anything that you tell him, then also appreciate that there's also a need for you from your side to actually look and say, if I were in the shoes of this person, what would I have done? And that's what we are actually missing. We are seeing financial institutions looking at the money side and saying, what have you brought to this? And they will actually keep quiet for a long time after you've signed all those many pages. In fact, sometimes we don't even have that time to read those documents.
Just because you want the money, you just sign.
You just sign here, and you sign. At the end, you are actually going to cry because nobody told you exactly. And I wish George can be in my shoes because that's what he talks. But when you go there, you will not find George. You find somebody else, and he will not say exactly what George is saying. I wish such can actually be brought to the front office, so that when we reach there, you have somebody. This is the way it is, and you advise accordingly. But George is putting it that way. But the people that we meet in the bank, they are really different from George.
Do you think George is just being diplomatic because he's on the show here?
So much so, I think so.
Georgie, just being diplomatic.
Not necessarily, and I appreciate where Repson comes from. Yachu has been on the other side and can now have a balanced perspective. What I'm trying to express is that information is a key issue that we should be focusing on here. When entrepreneurs and most of SMEs don't have the right information, you tend to ask for the wrong things sometimes. And I've had to advise sometimes business people who, instead of asking for working capital, they're asking for a term loan. If you ask for a term loan to service salaries for the next 2 months, you'd be paying me for 3-4 years. Yet what it required was basically a working capital. And when you give money out and the entrepreneur realizes that I have a surplus, they will not tell you that what I wanted to solve is now over. They become more innovative into other things. On the point that when you come to the bank, you see other people. As a bank, we are an institution and we speak one voice. Where there are variances, there are levels of escalation. And those front office staff are well trained and they can be trained better.
Before we go far, do they speak with one voice? Do you agree with that? Because when you go there as an SME to borrow, I mean, do you ever wish that this person should actually have been in my shoes, an entrepreneur, before they became into the bank, so that they understand where I'm coming from when I'm asking for this loan and what I really need? Is that what comes in your mind?
No. I think in terms of the relationships banks have with borrowers, in some cases there has been insufficient transfer of information. When you said instead of getting working capital, they're asking for a term loan, and they end up paying for the next 3 years. Why are you not advising that borrower on what's best for them? In terms of what the borrowers are signing up for, there have been several cases where borrowers do not understand how much they're going to be paying off. They do not understand the implications of being late in payments, how that turns into accrued interests, and over time that becomes a very big burden on the business. And banks are not looking at businesses the way they should. They're looking at businesses as something they can suck life out of because they are not supporting them. We would love for you to look at it differently. Connect better with borrowers, connect better with entrepreneurs, help them understand and set fair terms. Because if a business succeeds, they come back, they grow. But if a business fails because of a loan, then there's so much lost opportunity in the long run. I would like to, before you give the word over to others, I would like to invite everyone here to start looking at the new forms of businesses that are being created. Banks and the traditional investors are more interested into less risky forms of investment. They will readily invest into real estate. They'll readily invest into capital or assets. But there are new forms of businesses that are being created, and these businesses need to be invested into. They are the businesses that are creating the new jobs that we want to see. And I would really love for that to be started, to start being accommodated in the financial space. I'm talking about businesses that are looking into servicing tourism. We're talking about technology. Today, or maybe a few years back, maybe today it makes more sense, when someone is saying they're developing an application that could potentially service several businesses in Africa, and they need a push to be able to develop that further, to be able to test it, to take it to the market, and they're not being supported. There's so much that is being held back, and when we look at the target we have to meet of 200,000 jobs every year, those jobs are not going to come from building more houses. Those jobs are not going to come from the traditional businesses. They are going to come from these new forms of businesses. There's market for it. There's so much that can be created if these entrepreneurs, whether very small, whether growing, are supported in the right way.
And they're given that push.
And before I give it over, I would like to request that the National Bank gives more space and encourages angel investment. And I'm speaking of people who have experience in business, who can lend patient capital into these businesses that seem risky but have a lot of potential, because the people who are behind them are seeing the future. And they have what it takes to move Rwanda forward. I think, Grace,
the point is home and dry. As we go, because it's time for us to leave, it's important for us to understand the way forward when we move out of this particular room. Are we going back to business as usual, defend our positions, or what are we going to do, Dr. Monique, as a central bank? Very briefly, because we're out of time.
Yeah, I believe, like any other issue, here there is a problem of leadership. And to address really these issues, to be innovative, to see through in the future, like Grace is mentioning, to accommodate new forms and new ways of financing. That's really, it requires all of us to really revisit the status quo and see how to be innovative around it. And this is true of the regulators, this is true of the banks, and this is true of the SMEs themselves. But also, this is a complex issue. We cannot expect banks to fix this issue alone. We need a lot of education, we need a lot of other services. So it's a complex issue. Everyone has to play a role in it.
It's going to be a combined effort required to sort this particular issue. I'm told they're going for news right now, so we have to leave, and I think you've spoken for all of them. You said the regulator and also the banks, and all of us, it's a concerted effort. Thank you so much for your time on the program. This is a conversation that has to go on. Let's keep meeting, and I'm hoping we'll not cross over all of us. We'll need some of you on this side. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you also for watching and being a part of the program in many ways. We'll see you again next week on Monday. We're talking about the issue of the Doing Business report by the World Bank. And of course, Rwanda has dropped. We'll be debating more about this particular issue on Monday, 9 p.m. This is a debate you don't want to miss. See you that time. And of course, my name as always is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now.
This is an EA production.